Okay, so this is going to be either called Torah Talk or Shabbat Study, something along those lines. But either way, the plan is to study the Bible together. If you haven't seen my wife and I's testimony about um, how we've gotten to where we are in our life and faith, I would suggest you go back and watch that video. I might say some things here that sound kind of strange, and that would probably clarify that. The bottom line was I was convinced through a bunch of empirical evidence that we'd been lied to about a whole lot of things. So, in terms of life and faith, I needed to start over completely. I didn't have a crisis of faith. So, this is what some people would call deconstruction that leads to reconstruction. And a lot of what I'm going to say is my process of reconstruction, but I didn't have some traditional form of deconstruction. When I awakened to who I am and who our people are, it did not change what I knew to be true about who the Most High is and who and what His Word is and what His Word does. In fact, it greatly intensified it. But I knew that there was many things I probably needed to rethink. It's as if I was building this building of faith, of my own faith, and I knew that I needed to go back and re-examine it brick by brick, to take out that which I now found to be faulty. I wanted to remove any man-made apparatus that I had placed in place of what the Scripture itself had said. So I just wanted to restudy it all myself. I literally went back to page 1 of the Scriptures and started over. So what you're seeing here, what is Torah about? It started off on a whiteboard in my office. And I was literally re-asking myself this question. I didn't want to go to any commentaries. I didn't want to go to any other theological voices. I wanted to find out if there is some way that I could figure out. I wanted to find out what the Torah said the Torah was about, and begin to rebuild my faith in that way. So this map here is just my process of opening up the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, and breaking them into some very rough categories. So the percentages that you see here aren't exact. The in all of these breakdowns of the chapters, which I'll go through in just a moment, aren't 100% exact and precise, but there are these rough estimations that I found putting them in these categories was extremely helpful because it helped me to rebuild what constituted this thing I was building my whole life on, and am still building my whole life on. So this is what this was all about. What is the Torah all about? And we know that the word Torah in Hebrew, it means law, and it's most commonly translated as law, but it's also the connotation often, and maybe most of the time, is the word instruction. This is the Most High's instruction to His people about how to live and how to relate to Him and how to relate to one another and how to relate to the rest of the world. So I wanted to know what the Most High's instruction is for me and for us, and how that relates to everything else I already know to be true. So that's what we did. I started over at page 1, and we're going to look at Genesis 1 in just a moment. And it was just the beginnings of me starting back over and rebuilding my faith from the ground up. Now, just real quick about me, if you don't know who I am, I don't know everything. I don't know it all. I don't claim to know it all. But I also don't know nothing. There's a stewardship that the Most High has given me through years and years of leadership, years and years of studying the Scriptures, and several years of biblical and theological training that don't make me all in all better than anybody else, but I've been given these tools that I can now use. And the bottom line is, the point of this here is to use the tools that I have, the stewardship that I've been given, to help encourage whoever comes across this, and maybe even to help you begin to see what the Bible says and what it means for you in your life and your context. One last thing before we actually open up the scriptures itself. As I laid out this map that you see here, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, as I began to lay out the map, what became very obvious to me is that the Bible is just not about telling truth. It absolutely is, but it's something bigger than that. It's something actually way more beautiful than that. It is the Most High's self-revelation, which, as we begin to examine, hopefully I can show you, and hopefully you'll be more convinced, as I already am, that in his self-revelation, what he intends to do is tell you what is absolutely true, but also tell it to you in an extremely beautiful way. And the Bible often does things in ways that aren't the most efficient way to say something. It's just not, but it is the most beautiful. And if you begin to take that angle, then you start to understand why certain stories you wish you would have had heard more in certain stories, and why is he going on and on and on again about certain other things? Why is he doing it the way that he's doing it? Hopefully, we can step back, zoom out, and begin to show in the scriptures that God, he intends by his word to tell these extremely important truths that have gravitas up to the end of the world, literally. But also he intends to tell them in a way that is just so fly and beautiful. And he wants us to be in awe, not just at what he's saying, but how he has put these things together. That's what I hope as we begin to walk together through this, I hope you begin to see. And also as you go forward in your own personal study of the scriptures, hopefully you'll be able to see some of these themes as they're getting picked up and pulled out. So let's look at Genesis 1. Let's look at Genesis 1. Well, yeah, let's look at Genesis 1. So as I started over, I started looking at the text in Hebrew. In fact, what I wanted to do was memorize Genesis 1 in Hebrew to sharpen my Hebrew skills. But then just to often that forces you to slow down and think about what's being said in a different way. And sure enough, as I started reading and memorizing Genesis 1 in Hebrew, some things popped off at the page. So let's start here. Genesis 1, starting in verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Verse 2, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. There's a whole bunch to unpack here, and there are books and libraries written just about these three verses. But there's some things that I pulled out that I had never seen before that made me ask the question, what implications does this have for the whole Torah? So let's start here again at Genesis 1, starting in verse 1. In the beginning, this word here is bereshit. It's one word. You can see it here. Bereshit. Just one word put together, bereshit. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. From the very beginning, I saw something that I had never seen before. Bereshit, in the beginning, you have this prefix called bet. This is the letter bet or Beth. This prefix, when you want to say in the beginning, what you would typically see is this character bet with a bar underneath it. And what the bar underneath it does is it signifies the definite article, in the beginning. And you see that here. This word here is shemayim. And what you see here is ha, shemayim. This is the letter hey with a bar underneath it. That bar underneath it signifies the word the definite article, really ha, with the bar under it signifies the word the. But typically, if there's another prefix like this, if it wants to signify the definite article it has this bar underneath it. Let me show it to you again in the Hebrew. Bereshit, right? No bar. And then by the time we get here to Hashemayim, you have a bar under that hey, it signifies thee. Haaretz, it's the same thing. It's the same situation. So I started to say, what the heck is going on here? In the beginning. In all actuality, what's being said is in beginning. In beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So then the very first sentence of the Bible, you have to ask a simple question. In beginning, what? In beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In beginning, what? Now, our assumption is he's talking about the beginning of the world, the beginning of the heaven. I mean, what we see is he creates the heavens and the earth, and it's formless and void, and there's waters, and there's light, and then there's all these things. But when we begin to zoom out, I became convinced it's not talking about the Genesis 1 is the book of Genesis, which means beginning, in the beginning. The book of Genesis or beginning is not about the beginning of the world. It's about the beginning of a people. And let me show you why I believe that. If you zoom out, so what we're going to do in these Bible studies is hopefully, just like we did, we're going to look at particular words, particular sentences. We're going to zoom all the way in, and then hopefully we're going to zoom out. And as we zoom out, you'll see how the little small piece of the puzzle fits into the bigger piece of the bigger piece of the puzzle. I think another way to say it is, and I think the most accurate, in my opinion, the best analogy for the scripture is music. It's, and not just any kind of music, it's jazz music. And what the Most High intends to do is begin with these patterns, these particular beats, these particular rhythms, these particular themes. And what he expects you to do is to keep up with the music. In Genesis 1 and the book of Genesis as a whole, it begins to lay the foundation, the chords and the rhythm and the beat, and everything else is going to be these derivatives that play with the very themes that get started in Genesis. So let's look at Genesis, just an outline really briefly, and then we'll go back to the scriptures. Bereshit, in the beginning. This is the name of this book of the Bible. In Hebrew, the name of this book of the Bible is Bereshit. But we just said it's missing the definite article, so it's not in the beginning; it's in beginning. And the question is in beginning what? And what authority do we have to say we know what he's talking about beginning? Well, we zoom out and we look at the book as a whole. So I begin to break down Genesis 1 through 50, and these are just the big categories of what happens in the book of Genesis. In Genesis 1 through 11, it's approximately 25% of the book of Genesis. And in that 25%, it's called the antediluvian world. It's roughly, what happened before the flood, and then basically shortly thereafter. But the antediluvian world is Genesis 1 through 11. Here's what the Bible covers. Just think about the mass amount of information that the Bible covers in these 11 chapters. Creation, the fall of man, and in the fall of man, there's a talking serpent who ends up getting cursed and crawling on his belly. Women end up having pain in childbirth. Like all these, it's a lot of stuff that happens. And we're all most of us, if you're on this channel, are probably familiar with that story. Then Genesis 4 and 5 is the spread of man. And you've got these two genealogies, which we'll get into eventually, that are really, really interesting. But then by the time we get to Genesis 6, what we see is that the sons, what's called the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, they have sex with women, and they have these offspring, and these offspring called the Nephilim cause a whole bunch of trouble. So much trouble, in fact, that the world is corrupted and mankind is greatly corrupted. And that leads us to Genesis 7 through 9, which is Noah and the flood. And Noah and the flood, that whole story about, building an ark and putting animals in it, and the world being flooded, that happens then we come out of Genesis 9, and then we get the Table of Nations. And the Table of Nations is this list of, basically all the people that the three sons of Noah that repopulated the world, and all the peoples that derive from those three sons. And the Table of Nations functions basically like a who's who for the rest of the Bible, like a sort of map, a sort of treasure key for the rest of the Bible. And then chapter 11, you get the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel is really interesting because in the Tower of Babel, you only really get, I believe, either 6 or 9 verses total about what was going on with the Tower of Babel. And apparently it was so bad, though, that the Most High, he comes down and he disperses people all over the world. Now, that's a lot of information. But when you begin to read these things, there's a lot of details. So also, I went back and I started reading the Apocrypha and the Pseudepigrapha and all these different accounts just to see, why are these books left out? Should they have been left out? What supplemental information do these books give us? Are these books even helpful? Those are the questions I was asking. And as I began to read books like Jubilees and Jasher, what you see is that in Genesis 1 through 11, it functions like bullet points. A couple of these other books go into way greater detail about some of these things that were going on. The book of Enoch with the fall of the Watchers, and much more detail in Jubilees about the life of Abraham and his dad and his family and what led to him going forth and all those kind of things. So then I started looking back at Genesis 11 or 1 through 11, and I went, oh, Genesis 1 through 11 is bullet points. Genesis 1 through 11 expects that you already know, you as the reader, you as the receiver of this material, you already have it's able to go through these things in bullet points because you already have a bunch of the other information, either through other books or through the oral traditions or whatever these things are. But Genesis 1 through 11 is bullet points. And again, everything that I'm saying might sound crazy, but we're going to come back and we're going to continue to unpack, what brought me to these conclusions. So Genesis 1 through 11, 25% of the book of Genesis is about the fall of the man, the creation of the world, the fall of man, the serpent, the fall of the watchers, and Nephilim, the flood, this worldwide flood that happened, the Table of Nations, and then the Tower of Babel that made everybody disperse all over the world. Whoa, that's a lot of information. You would think that in and of itself would be 30 books worth of information. But it gets crunched into 11 chapters in Genesis. Why? Because the book of Genesis is not about the beginning of the world. It's about the beginning of a people. Now, Genesis 1, that's Genesis 1 through 11. Now, Genesis 12 through 50 is about the patriarchs. So 75%, roughly 75% of the book of Genesis is about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. 25% of the book of Genesis is about creation, fall, spread of man, fall of watchers, the flood, Table of Nations, Tower of Babel, and the dispersing of the tongues and of people. 25%. 75% of Genesis is about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Now, chapters 30 through 70, that's roughly 30% of the book of Genesis. So the book of Genesis spends more time on the life of Joseph and what he went through than it does all these other things: creation, fall, spread of man, fall of watchers, flood, Table of Nations, Tower of Babel. So when we let the Bible speak for itself, the Bible itself seems to, by way of how much priority these things get, the Bible itself seems to say that the book of Genesis is not about the beginning of the world. The book of Genesis is about the beginning of a family. Okay, so now let's go back. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Bereshit, in beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, this word here is, we've already talked about a little bit, but it's shemayim, shemayim. And it just means the sky. And this book, this word here is eretz, and it just means the ground. So a very simple alternate version of Genesis 1 is, in beginning, God created the sky and the ground. Now, the ground was formless and void, tohu wa vohu, right? The ground was formless and void, and darkness was over the face. This is the word face, surface, was over the face of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim was moving over the face of the waters. So what do we get? Right after we get this word Bereshit, in beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then we get this face-to-face conflict. This is the word face right here, just in case you don't believe me. The face. So what is the imagery that comes to mind when we read this in its original context? In beginning, God created the sky and the ground, and the ground was formless and void. It's a kind of goopy, uncreated reality. And what was the condition of this goopy, uncreated state? What was the condition of these things? The condition was that it was formless and void. I'm sorry, that's the formless, goopy darkness or whatever. And there was darkness on the face of the deep. This is the word tahom, the deep, tahom. We'll come back to that. There was darkness over the face of the deep. And the spirit, that is the ruach of Elohim, was merechefet, was moving over or upon the face of the waters. So what do we have here? We have something going on. What is the imagery that's being produced here in Genesis 1, verse 2? You've got some kind of darkness that's happening. And the reason we know that it's darkness is, first of all, it uses the word darkness, but it's also formless and void. First of all, the earth is already, or the earth is already here, right? The beginning, in beginning, God created the sky and the land. And the sky, when He had created it, was formless, and it was void. It was wild. I've heard some other people call it wild wilderness, right? And that's a decent way to say that. And there's something dark and ominous about the world in its raw, uncultivated state. And in fact, it uses the word deep, tahom, which the Bible is going to pick up on for a really long time after this, right? And what happens? The spirit of the Most High, the spirit of God, was moving over the face of the waters. So we get a face-to-face confrontation. What we get from the very beginning, and not confrontation in the sense that there's some war, some battle. In fact, when you compare this to the creation mythology of the Egyptians, the Babylonians, or others, what you see is strikingly, what you see is there's no confrontation, that the Most High speaks and it happens, and all of creation must stand at attention to His voice. And that is the whole point, that He really is the Most High God. He's the one and only. He is the sovereign. He is the supreme ruler. He used some really interesting terms to get us there, though. When it says here in verse 2 that the Spirit of God was moving merechefet over the surface of the waters, this word merechefet is a really rare really rare Hebrew word. In fact, I think it's only used maybe twice in the whole of the Old Testament. And this word, the reason why it's interesting is because some other translations don't say moving, it says something else. I believe the ESV, it says the Spirit of God was, this is the ESV, hovering over the face of the waters. Hovering. Now, when you read commentaries, those kind of things, the common consensus is that it's talking about God hovering over the waters like a dove, and that's what's happening. It's like a anthropomorphism of the Most High hovering over the waters, the Spirit of the Most High hovering over the waters like a dove, and there's some validity to that, because when we fast forward to the Noah story, we're going to see a dove being sent out over the surface of the deep, the formless and void, dark, deep waters of judgment that has happened over the whole earth, and a dove gets sent out to hover over it. So there is some validity to making those connections. But in the Septuagint, when it comes to in the Septuagint is the Greek. The Septuagint. The Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. Let's see if it does it right here. See, it doesn't say it here. And the Spirit of God rushed upon the waters. Well, what the word that's being used in, here it is, the Lexicon English Bible, hovering. The word that's being used there is the word in the Greek. The word that it uses is a word for vocalize, as in clears his throat or begins to hum. How the vocal cords hover, or the vocal cords vibrate. It's talking about vibration. The vocal cords vibrating as he's about to speak. And all of this makes sense because what? We have the word for face right here, right? That the Spirit of God is hovering over the face of the water. So there's this face-to-face confrontation that the Most High comes with the dark, deep, uncreated, wild wilderness. And what does he do? He begins to hover, or he begins to vocalize. And then as soon as he vocalizes, what happens? Then God said, let there be light. And there was light. And the literal translation is, and Elohim said, be light, and there was light, you know. So this is no argument. There's no confrontation here. There's no argumentation. He says to do it, and then it is done, and that's it. So the first words of creation here is this word Omer. Omer, yeah, which just means he said, he spoke. God speaks, and it happens. Verse 4, and God saw that the light was good. He sees that it's good. Okay, so he's making this judgment call because he's the Most High, and he can do that. He sees that the light is good, and he separates the light from the darkness. And God called. Now, hopefully you see that. There's a big difference between God saying and God calling. So now this is the second action that he's going to take in creating reality as we know it. And I'm going slow through this for a reason. Hopefully I'm not boring anybody to death. But God said, Omer, let there be light. And when he says it, it's created. You could say ontologically, right? The substance of this thing happens. He sees this thing called light that he's just made with his voice, and he sees that it is good. Tov. He sees that it's good. And when he sees that it's good, he separates the light from the darkness, and then God calls. In other words, God names the light day. God called the light day. So what is day? Day, according to Genesis 1, is the name of the light that God created. That sounds like so simple, like who cares? What does it matter? But we'll get back to potentially why that matters eventually. But God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So now light has a name, day. Darkness has a name, night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day, or day one. Then God said, let there be an expanse. That is the word rakia. Let there be an expanse. Some, King James, I think it says a canopy or whatever. Let there be an expanse in the middle of the waters, or in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. Now, again, here's what's interesting. This word waters, water is the word mayim, right? Right? Mayim. And he separated the waters, mayim, from la mayim. What is that? Waters from these other waters, okay? And God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below, that is from below, and the waters from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. Verse 8. And God called the rakia, the same word that we saw back here. God called the expanse Shemayim. And there was evening and there was morning a second day. So, okay, what's the point of everything that I've just done there? What I started to realize is that in Genesis, we are not talking about the purpose is not the chronological order of creation or 7 24-hour days in creation. That's not the point. That's not the point of Genesis. The point of Genesis is I think a better way to say it is either the algorithm of creation or the layers of creation. Here's what I mean. So Genesis 1, first he said, remember that word, Omer, he said, be light, right? And there was light. So the word he says is said, he said, that the scriptures say is said, and it creates. And then he called that light day, and then the darkness that he separated, he called night, and it categorizes, right? And then day one is good. That's the first day. So the first day he creates and he categorizes. So this is who he is. Now, this is God's self-revelation of who he is. And he's got a motivation for why he's doing all this. And ultimately it's going to be about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we're going to go from there. But we got to start where the Bible starts, right? So I just want to slow down, and I'm hopefully I'm showing what are the motivations behind what's being said here. First, God says, and he creates when he says, and then he categorizes, he calls, he names. He has the authority to name the sky, the earth, and everything else, right? So he categorizes, and then in verse 6, he creates what we call the expanse, or the rakia, or the canopy, right? The dome. Who was it? Josephus, when he in his commentary on, and he was Josephus was a Judean that was there the day that Israel fell in 70 AD, and he ended up getting captured by the Roman army, and he ended up becoming cool with one of the Roman figureheads, and basically he got commissioned to write these commentaries about who the Israelites were. Blah blah blah. But in one of his commentaries about Genesis, he talks about this rakia, and he says, "Oh, it's a glass dome. It's a big glass ceiling over the world." Anyway, so verse 6, it says, God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters." And in creating that expanse, he creates it. When he says something, that word Omer, he said, creation happens. There's no way for creation to disobey. When he says something, it happens, period. And then he sees the waters above and the waters below. He separates them, and he calls the waters above Shemayim, or the heavens, right? So stay with me just for a second. Why is that? Why am I spending so much time there? Because from the very beginning, what we're starting to get is the motivation and some really beautiful truths underlying what's happening in Genesis, and what's his motivation for saying these things. Let's go back to the original text just for a second. Shemayim. That's this word, Shemayim. Shemayim. The Israelite people in Deuteronomy 6, they have this, there's this creed that they say essentially, and it's called the Shema. And Shema means to listen or to hearken. Shema Israel, right? Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah, your Elohim is one. You shall love Yahuwah, your Elohim, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? That is the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, right? That's called the Shema. It's from Deuteronomy either 5 or 6. The Shema. So I started looking at this and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. It looks like what we've already said so far is that the substance of this thing is something called the expanse, right? Just like light is the substance of day and day is its name. The expanse, the rakia, is the substance of this thing that we call the sky, right? And again, I'm just taking it in its raw biblical format. I'm not talking about science or biology or whatever, which anyway, come to your own conclusions there. But I'm just talking about what the Bible just explicitly is saying. What we've got is the same pattern playing itself out. Light is to day as darkness is to night, as the rakia is to shemayim, or the heavens. So in other words, the heavens or heaven is the name of this thing that we call, or that is the expanse or the canopy or the rakia. So I started to go, that's really, I never noticed that before. I'm like, what? That's weird. Why does that matter? That's so strange. And then it looks like a compound word. This word heavens or shemayim looks like a compound word, because remember, in verse 6, God said, let there be an expanse in the middle of the waters, that is mayim. And even if you don't know Hebrew, you can see these little strange characters look exactly like the end of these little strange characters. So separate the waters from the waters. So I started thinking, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It looks like the verb shema, or hearken or listen, versus or compounded with the word mayim, or water. In other words, the waters that listened. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I stepped back and I started thinking about the context in which this was likely handed down. And there are some arguments about all this stuff from a whole bunch of people that spent time studying it way more than me. But most likely, the book of Genesis is handed down to the people. Likely the stories are being handed down while they're in captivity in Egypt, and these things are being codified in written form during their captivity in Babylon. Right? That's most likely the timeline of what's all happening. They've had these stories for a really long time, but by the time they get to Babylon, they're starting to write these things down because they don't have a temple, they don't have the their place for formalized worship, so they're taking all these stories that they already knew, and probably written things that they already had, and they're putting them all together. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But what's my point? If these stories are being handed down after they had come out of Egypt, what's interesting about this thing called the sky being called the heavens, or Shemayim? Well, what's interesting is, how did they get to where they were in the first place? How'd they get to the wilderness? Well, verse 6, then God said, let there be an expanse in the middle of the waters, and let it be separate. A division between the waters and the waters. So God splits the waters. That's the image. Why is that interesting? Because how did they get to the wilderness in the first place? Well, they were enslaved in Egypt under Pharaoh's tyranny. And what does the Most High do? A whole bunch of plagues. Then Pharaoh ends up driving them out, and they get to the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea. They get to what all English Bibles say is the Red Sea, which it doesn't. The Bible actually doesn't say that. It says the Sea of Reeds. They get to the Sea of Reeds, and God splits the waters, and they walk through. In other words, the waters listen to the Most High, and the people of Yah walk through, and they get to the other side. And then the waters, at the command of the Most High, collapse, and it means judgment for the Egyptians, and then they continue on their journey through the wilderness. It's my hypothesis then, in light of all of this information, it's my hypothesis that the Israelites were meant to look up at the sky and see the waters above, especially in comparison to the waters below, and see how the Most High has divided the two and be reminded of their own redemption. This is why it's called the heavens, or the Shemayim, because these they were supposed to be reminded that those waters listen. They listen to the Most High's command. And when these waters, these creation waters, when they're split, and there's the waters above and the waters below, now all the rest of life can flourish. How does the Most High create? He creates by splitting the waters and creating life and beauty and shalom and peace and vibrance, and everything else comes from first him splitting the waters. Which, isn't that ironic that that's exactly how he redeems Israel? He splits the waters with, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there on down the line. But in the Noah story, he collapses the waters as a judgment on the whole earth and preserves one family. And then when those waters subside, then he starts over again. So it's through the splitting of the waters again that the rest of creation gets to begin again. So we'll keep going from there. So when we look at Genesis 1, hopefully, if any of that is confusing, or if you have any extra questions or any thoughts, especially if you're on YouTube or whatever, leave thoughts, comments, questions, anything that needs to be clarified. I'd love to engage in that way. So when we go back to Genesis 1, and we see, first of all, that this pattern where God says and it's created, God calls, and then he sees what he created, he likes it, he says it's good, and then he categorizes it. And then we come to Genesis 2, and in fact, the second day of creation is the only day of creation you see. Day 1 is good, day 3 is good, day 4 is good, day 5 is good, day 6 is very good, but day 2 is the only day that does not get designated as either good nor bad. And why is that? I think the rest of the Bible could support me in this, is because the way the Most High uses water, he uses it both good and bad. Meaning the waters are split, and we'll see by the time we get to Genesis 2 that there has to be a mist over the water. The waters, these chaos waters that used to cause death and used to be filled with death, are now being used, funneled, and made to create life. Everything that you've ever had, all the animals have to drink from this. All the plants have to grow from this. All of humanity, you cannot live without water, right? So this thing, we get introduced to this theme of water in the Bible, and in the Bible, over and over and over and over again, water is either used to give life, where Yahushua, Jesus, says, "I am the living water," right? You have to have me to live. And you get stories like Noah, where they flood, or when Yahushua takes the Gerasene demoniac, the demons that were filled in the Gerasene demoniac, and he casts them into these pigs, and the pigs jump over the cliff into the water, right? So water is either used for judgment, or it's used for creation and life. And I think this is why it doesn't get a designation of either good or bad, because it depends on how he's using it in that moment. That's what I think. That's my best hypothesis. Anyway, so God said, and he creates. So then he says, "Let there be dry ground." So he creates it. And then he calls that dry ground eretz, or water, or earth. So again, it's sticking to the pattern perfectly. Creation, he creates, he says, then he categorizes. So who is the Most High? The Most High is the one who creates the thing, and he also categorizes it. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. When we look at the 6 days of creation, this is what we see: that the first day he creates light, the second day he creates the sky and the sea, the third, or he creates the sky, the sea's already there. He begins to deal with the sea, you might say. The third day, he brings up the dry land, and he puts some trees there. The fourth day parallels with the first day. So now we've got a pattern, a very serious and explicit pattern that's happening. And the reason we know that it's a pattern and that we're not talking about 7 24-hour days is because before there ever is a sun or a moon, there is light. There's days. There's morning, there's evening. The first day, there's morning, there's evening. The second day, there's morning, there's evening. There's third day. I mean, there's evening and there's morning is actually how it goes. But it's not until day 4 that there's actually a sun and a moon and stars. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So what we're not talking about. I think the best way to talk about what's actually happening here is the layers of creation. Is how I've labeled it here. So day 4, he creates the sun and the moon and the stars, and they become rulers of the sun of the day, the moon and the stars over the rulers over the night. And then the sky and the sea, they fill the birds fill the sky, the fish fill the sea. They become fillers, and God has given them everything that they need in and of themselves to continue to perpetuate, right? So it's one of the ways that he blesses back here. He blesses the water animals and the sky animals, and part of their blessing is they get to fill the sky and the sea. And then on day 6, he creates the land animals, but then there's a specific emphasis on humans at the very end. Just like in day 3, he creates the land, but he gives a specific emphasis to trees. And this is the first place in the scriptures where we begin to see trees and people being correlated. Like, oh, that's really interesting. And we're going to see it over and over and over again. Think about Psalm chapter 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that gives its roots, that sends its roots out by the stream. And in its season, it bears fruit. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff, which the wind drives away. Right? Psalm 1 is just riffing off of Genesis 1. People are like trees. And Yahusha, Jesus, he says, a good tree bears good fruit. A bad tree bears bad fruit. You will know people by their fruit. He's explicitly making a tree is like humans. Humans are like trees analogy. Very interesting. That starts in Genesis 1 in this pattern, right? Okay. So let's look down at this just really briefly. This is the best way that I could make sense of what was happening just in the original text without the theological motivation or without without somebody else in my head. I tried to, just with the text in front of me, try to make sense of what's happening here. And this is the best that I could come up with. So if you can approve upon it, you're welcome to. But what happens, what the whole point of this creation narrative is to show us the layers by which the Most High had made things. He's showing us the pieces to the puzzle, right? He's allowing us to pick up and examine all of the things that he has created, because what he's going to do for the rest of the Bible is going to use all these things as analogies. He's going to be playing and manipulating all these things. So again, think about this like jazz music. What we're doing is he's setting us up to hear the tunes, to hear the beat. We're stepping into creation to him on the first at the creation of the world, and we're beginning to see the pieces of the puzzle. And I think the best way, hopefully all that makes sense, the best way that I could say it is, it's like it's like layers of creation. So for instance, and if I could do this whole thing over again, I would actually put it in verse. I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because he creates the core of the thing, and then it's as if he's creating layer after layer after layer outward in Genesis. The first layer is you might say the ontological layer, meaning what a thing is in its substance. The second layer is its identity. What is it called? What's its name? The third layer of creation is its jurisdiction, what a thing does. The fourth layer is its anatomy, what a thing contains, or basically its container, the container of the thing that he made, right? And then the fifth layer is what the thing does, right? And this is what he means to show us what it is, like what the sub in its substance, the name that he calls it, the job that he gives it, what it contain, or what's its container, and then fifthly, its occupation, right? So an example of this is what we just saw in Genesis 1. God says, let there be light, and there's light. He sees that the light is good. He distinguishes or divides, separates between the light and the darkness, and the light he calls day. So light is its ontological, the substance of the thing, but its name is day. And then there's morning. This is its jurisdiction, right? So there's morning and there's evening. So the sun rules over the day, and it's been giving this jurisdiction. I hope you understand what I'm saying. And then it gets a container, right? Day 4, it gets a container, and that container is the sun. It's a light. And verse 5, it gets we get the clarity of its occupation. It rules over the day. So that's the 5 layers of creation with light. There's light, there's day, there's morning, there's sun, and it rules over the day. And this is what he does with all of these things. Here we go. Wait. Okay. Let's go back to the scriptures. Starting in verse 24. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kind, livestock and creeping things, beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with its seed and its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, 6th day. Okay. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? What does it mean to be made in the image of God? There's a lot of answers out there. There's a lot of answers to that question. And there's some people that like the answers are so embedded, the theological, whatever particular theological camp that you come from, those answers are so embedded in what you believe that this is like a nonsense question even. Some people would say, well, it means we're not like the animals because we can reason, and we have these these certain cognitive functions and those kind of things. That's not what the scriptures say. um some people, there's a lot of different answers to the image of God, but I think when we slow down in Genesis 1, which it's very easy to go very quickly through this because we think we already know what's going on. But when we slow down through Genesis 1, I think we begin to get a clearer answer as to um, what does it mean to be made in the image of God. Let's look at um, the second half of the creation narrative, you might say. Let me just go back and read verse 13. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Starting verse 10. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together, he called seas. And God saw that it was good. See, the sea is good. The sea is good. The earth is good. Anyway, verse 11. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit bearing trees, fruit bearing trees bearing fruit in which there is seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the third day. So now we get this new pattern emerging as these created things begin to get their functions. We begin to see that some have seed in and of themselves, and they're able to perpetuate their own kind, right? So fruit trees can bear more fruit trees, fish can bear more fish, animals can bear more animals, etc., and etc. Let's just go back to this chart for a second. So you get fruits and veggies in verse 11, and they are called fillers, or I've categorized them as fillers. So he creates, he categorizes, he creates, categorizes, he creates, categorizes, on and on. And then we start to get the tide starts to turn. In day 3, he creates these fillers, and they begin to fill the land, the birds and whatnot, the fruit trees and whatnot. And then on day 4, we get the rulers. So fruits, veggies, fish, birds, they're fillers. They have seed in of themselves, and they're able to perpetuate themselves. The sun, moon, stars, they're rulers. They're rulers over the day. They provide 2 very different functions. And then you got Then you got on day 5 the expansion of these fillers. The water and sky animals are blessed. They are blessed. God blesses them, and he makes them fillers of the sky and of the ground. So sorry, just to correct myself. First, these fruits and veggies begin to fill the earth, and they have seed in of themselves. Then you get the sun and the moon and the stars, and they rule over the day and the night. And then you get these are just highly technical patterns. I'm hoping that you're saying this is an extreme amount of intention and precision that the Most High has given in his word. So the water and sky animals are fillers, and then the land animals and the humans are rulers. But the humans get a very different it's the water and the sky animals are blessed, but the sun, moon, and the stars aren't blessed, and the fruits and the vegetables aren't blessed. The land animals and the humans are blessed, but the land animals and the water animals and the sky animals aren't rulers. The only piece of God's creation that is blessed, it's a filler, and it's a ruler is humanity. The fruits and vegetables, they're not blessed, and they're not rulers. The lights, they're rulers, but they're not fillers, and they're not blessed. The water animals and the sky animals, they're blessed and they're fillers, but they're not rulers. The land animals are blessed and they're fillers, but they're not rulers. It's only Adam and Isha, the woman. It's only the man and the woman who are made all of these things. So what does it mean to be blessed? What does it mean to be made in the image of God? It is to categorically be blessed as a ruler and filler of the earth. Some people have heard it say it's a job description, which is true. He has designated human beings with this blessing of being the rulers and the stewards of the world. That's what it means to be made in the image of God. We're called to rule, we're called to fill, and we are inherently blessed. What does the word blessed mean? We'll get to that probably another time. But this is the first time that man is blessed. And that blessing sticks with us. And what you'll see is that blessings and curses are very, very sticky. I'm sure if you're on this, if you're finding this and you might have some questions about what I believe about Deuteronomy 28 and the blessings and the curses, and can somebody, if they've trusted in Jesus, can they actually be cursed? And I've wrestled with all of those things. We'll get to those eventually. But what you're going to find is that the blessings and the curses of the Most High are very, very sticky. So when Adam and Eve, or Adam and Isha to be more exact, when Adam and the woman are blessed, when they fall, that blessing is not taken away from them. We'll get there on another day. So what does it mean to be made in the image of God? According to Genesis chapter 1, to be made in the image of God is to be blessed with the responsibility to rule and fill according to God's word and God's will. And we are ontologically different than everything else because of the fullness of the blessing that God has given us as created beings. All the benefits that all the other created things have, we have, but we're the only one that has them all. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So this is the days of creation. This is Genesis 1. And hopefully that, and I actually put this next to it. So day 1, you get light. And day 4, you get the sun, moon, and the stars, these rulers. Day 2, you get sky and sea, and you get day 5 that correlates with it, birds and fish, and they're fillers. Day 3, you get the land, and then you specifically get this special group of vegetation called trees. And day 6, you get animals, but you get a special kind of animals called humans. And it's only these humans that get to rule and to fill. They're blessed and they get to rule and fill. And that blessing really matters, but they're blessed and they get to rule and fill. What's so special about a tree? This is just for free. These are my own musings. A tree is unique because its roots dig down deep into the earth, and its branches reach into the sky. So it's a connector of heaven and earth. And in a lot of ways, that is what humanity is meant to do and meant to be. We are, as his image bearers, we are to his kingdom come, his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is our mission. And we're going to get commissioned in Genesis 1. Genesis 1? Yeah, Genesis 1 with the what's called the cultural mandate, right? Fill the earth and subdue it, all that charge. So we have a real responsibility to connect heaven and earth. We have the capability and the ability to have a relationship and to walk with the Most High, to know him. And in knowing him and walking with him, we connect his rule and upon his rulership on creation. That's the original design. We're much like trees in that way. The trees connect the sky and the ground. It's, I think, it's what makes them unique. That's my hypothesis. Okay, so that's just Genesis 1, and hopefully you'll stick with me, and we can walk through all of Genesis, because these, again, like I said, Genesis 1 through 11, the bigger picture. These are actually bullet points. It might seem like we've gone through a whole lot of details just in this, probably hour that we've been on, but in all actuality, these are bullet points, and these are things that you need to know by the time we get to Abraham, because when Abraham steps on the scene, the game changes and the story really starts. This is just the prelude to the story. In fact, a long time ago, I was reading a commentary by a guy, and it was on the book of Exodus, and he said, the book of Genesis is really, it's nothing more than just the introduction to the book of Exodus. And I was like, whoa, that's a really strong statement. I'm not sure that that's even right or true, or that he should say that. But, and I don't think I would say it quite that strongly, but I do think there's some truth to the fact that a lot of the things that are happening in Genesis are to help us to understand what's going on elsewhere. And as I just began to study the Torah more slowly, it became obvious to me that especially Genesis 1 through 11 is written in bullet points so that we can finally get to what the Most High really wants to talk about, and that's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and the rest of the family. So, all right, I pray that the Most High blesses you and keeps you. I pray this has been some kind of encouragement, and if you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you, and give a fist emoji in the comments if you made it to the very end of the video. And we are going to keep doing this. I've already, based on these discoveries, I did a Bible study all the way through, just walking very slowly, chapter by chapter, through the book of Genesis. And so, by the Most High's grace, I'm going to begin to re-record those and upload these here. If there's any questions that you have, or any comments, or even any criticism, so long it's respectful, leave it in the comments below. And if this was some kind of encouragement, leave a like and subscribe and share. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you, and be gracious to you. And my favorite benediction from Paul, Romans 15:4. May the God of hope, Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Hallelujah.